And we're off. Welcome, friends, to another Whiskey Me tasting. We are doing our World Whisky tasting tonight. Perhaps it's your first time joining us for a tasting. Perhaps it's your 20th time. Don't know if we've done 20. Probably approaching that. But either way, welcome. No two tastings are the same. This one's going to be one of the best, I assure you right now. I'm just warming you all up as we fill the room. I won't lie, I have cracked into my pouch of Bal Masque already. If you haven't, you have stronger willpower than I do. It's a cracker. This is, it might be my favourite world whiskey we've sent out so far. What are we on now? Is it the fifth, sixth? Fifth, I think. Absolute belter from the Lakes Distillery. So there's about 26 of you in. Let's go with this. We scheduled this. We thought we were going to be joined by Chris Pateman, who is Lakes Distillery ambassador. Then we sent out an email this morning to you all saying we were going to have two guests, Tyler and Greg. And now Tyler's not coming because Greg's going to solo it because Greg's basically a total legend and didn't want Tyler kind of cramming his style. So it's just me and Greg. I can't wait for this. So Greg, come on in. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, Tristan. Good to see you.
What an introduction. What a word-filled introduction. Good to see you, Greg. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Just excited. And gutted that Chris can't be here. But I got the call last night and I'll do my best to be the best super sub I can be. And we get to talk about whiskey over a dram. So what's better than that?
Exactly, nothing. So you are sales director for Lakes Distillery.
So I head up the UK sales team, but it's a very grand title and actually small business. It involves all manner of things that anyone who works in small business out there can probably appreciate. So love my job. It's an absolute privilege to go and tell the world about our whiskey. Absolutely love it.
Is most of the sales UK, or are you exporting well?
Yeah, we're exporting already for a couple of years now. Been exporting to the Far East, to Japan in particular, Taiwan, China. Closer to home, a couple of European markets, Belgium, Netherlands, and lots more coming later this year, actually. So UK is bigger for now, but we've got plans for a lot more export in the future.
Cool. Right. Maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about the distillery. I actually visited the Lakes once, the distillery, I think it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And it hadn't been long opened, I don't think, at the time. I was writing a book about gin because you make gin there as well. I haven't actually tried the gin for a while, but I know at the time it was banging gin, like really, really good. I think you were foraging juniper berries from up on the lakes there as well. Anyway, let's not get too caught up on gin, but it's an amazing distillery, an amazing location, and an amazing tourist attraction now amongst the lakes, which itself is a tourist attraction.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege to drive there. I live about 2 hours from there, so I'm not on site very much, probably every second or third week, but it's literally it's breathtaking setting for a distillery. The full backstory is a chap called Paul Curry, whose dad had founded Arran Distillery way back when. Always had whiskey was in the family. He always had a vision, a dream to make whiskey in England, which going back 10, 15 years ago was a really quite a novel thing. There was obviously English whiskey code by then, but I think that was probably about it in terms of anyone that was up and running. So he'd always had this vision, and his dad had always said, as and when you do it, go and visit the Lake District. They'd holidayed there, and he's like, that's just a perfect place to build distillery. Lots of water, great climate, and actually lots of space to put casks down. And, rather than trying to think about city centre and where you're going to, build a warehouse there. So Paul found an old dairy farm that had been derelict for, goodness me, probably like 30 odd years. It was in a state of disrepair. He met a chap called Nigel Mills, who invested as well, and they became the two co-founders. And it all started from there. So it's kind of Paul with the vision, and then it was kind of Nigel there to help and support to get this idea up and running. But being in the Lake District, strict planning laws mean that we couldn't just knock down that site and build a red brick building. It took 3 years to basically piece it apart brick by brick, put in a distillery inside what was a farm, and then put those bricks back on exactly as they were found. And hence that took a 3-year process before we could start distilling at the end of 2014. So that was how it all came about. And we always set out. You mentioned the gin. We do make a couple of fantastic gins that we're proud of, but we're a whiskey distillery, and that was always the view from the outset, and that was what was built back in from 2011.
Yeah, it's interesting because this would be considered like a new world whiskey distillery in that it's English, but the Lakes is really close to the Scottish border, like about half an hour, 40 minutes away. And not only that, but they used to smuggle whiskey across the border and onto the River Derwent there and everything. So it's an area that's kind of quite, if not rich in distilling, then certainly rich in whiskey history, right?
Yeah, I mean, way back when, we're going back generations and generations, but yeah, it's got close ties to, I mean, geographically speaking, it's very close to Scotland. We actually, we don't have our own bottling line because that's a whole other industry in itself. Our whiskey is bottled in Scotland. We're very close to the border. And yeah, I mean, being in England, we don't have to follow the SWA guidelines, but we do because we respect tradition. We're just trying to push things on a little bit further in terms of how we approach things. But yeah, we're literally drop the border 30 miles and we could be in Scotland.
Yeah, and it does feel like a Scotch distillery as well to me. I mean, a small one, but I remember walking around the still house there. And by the way, we've got pictures of it on our blog post on the Whiskey Me website, and of course there's the Lakes Distillery website you can go and have a look at, or just Google image search, whatever. Like it feels like a little malt whiskey distillery in Scotland. More than any other, I think, English whiskey distillery I've been to, I don't think there's one that seems so. Maybe it's the proximity,
Yeah, and probably a bit about the landscape, and we are on the just off River Derwent, which is where we took our water from originally, by Lake Bassenthwaite. Yeah, I mean
and the Curry's history, of course, with Arran Distillery.
Yeah. So there's plenty of connections. And yeah, so I mean, it's just a stunning place. It's a stunning place, but with those constraints we've got, we're always going to be niche and small in the world of whiskey. So we just want to basically make the best whiskey we can make with the sort of limited capacity that we're always going to have.
Yeah, sure. So before we went online, we were talking a little bit about Bal Masque, and you were saying how it's a bit of a deviation away from the house style, and you got limited quantities of that. So it'd be really interesting to hear from you sort of what the house style is, where you see it at, what we would consider to be a prototypical Lakes Distillery whiskey, and then of course move on to Bal Masque and how that differs from it.
Absolutely, yes. So Whiskey Maker Reserve is the name of our house style. We first launched Whiskey Maker Reserve in 2019. The Whiskey Maker Reserve #1. We've then had #2, #3, and we launched our 4th release earlier this year. So imagine that's almost like a journey as we ultimately land on that final house style, and one day it will just become the Whiskey Maker Reserve. But right now we're working with small stock levels relative to where we're going to be in the future. So it's kind of a journey to get to our ultimate house style. What I can say is that house style is very much sherry led, wood forward, big, bold, heavily influenced from sherry and the cask in terms of the flavor profile of that whiskey. But it's about, very much sherry forward, but there's a lot more to it than that. So if I can give you an example, that the kind of philosophy is almost where science meets art, and the science comes in terms of the sheer depth of sherry casks that we use. So as an example, there's 37 different cask specifications for our Oloroso casks that we use. So I suppose the approach is very scientific. Lots of meticulous planning and buying of those casks and looking after those casks. And the idea is then almost create a palette of as many different colours that we can for Davil, who's our whiskey maker, and his team to blend. And that's where the art comes in terms of creating as many possible colours to then, in theory, go and try and paint a masterpiece. And I suppose the idea is better to to have 1,000 different colours to choose from rather than 3 or 4 different colours. It just makes it a much wider, broader platform in terms of creating that house style. Just to add more layers of depth and flavour and everything that we want our whiskey to be. So it's sherry led, wood forward being the house style. the Bal Masque sits under the banner of Whiskey Makers Editions, each one being a complete diversion from what we do. So Bal Masque is the third edition we've launched this year. The first we launched was called Lagute. It was very delicate, very sweet, fragrant flavors. You can probably imagine the kind of cask influence in there, almost the polar opposite of sherry.
Yeah.
We then had Miramar, which was, to touch on the cask, there was a bit of port pipe influence going on with that whiskey. And then Bal Masque is almost like a celebration of French oak, and what the team can do when they work with French oak and extract the best of that. So limited edition again. We just had a chat off air before we came on around. Yeah, we'll juggle things around and try and get you guys a little bit more for your followers to buy. But they're all going to be complete one-offs, never to be seen again. And that's almost like the fun, creative, expressive side for Davil and the team to kind of play and really explore new flavors and create new things.
Do you know how many bottles there are in total of Bal Masque?
In the UK, we had just under 2,500 to sell.
Okay.
And there was a ballot on our website of 700 bottles kind of the day before the launch that just went literally way oversubscribed. So yeah, it's not just doing the salesman's trick here, but literally, if you like it, really do get a bottle while you can, because it's not going to be around for too long.
Yeah. I'm just sort of in my head doing the maths on how much of the 2,500 bottles we've taken of you.
Quite a lot of pouches. It was
there's a lot of pouches gone out. Yeah. But yeah, speaking of which, like as you say, we did have a tiny allocation of bottles to sell on the website. They all sold, I think, like within an hour or so. But we're hoping to get a few more off you. I'm going to twist Greg's arm.
This has been recorded, right? So yeah, this is
exactly. You're done now.
That's my
if we do get more, guys, and you're listening, watching, then we will put something on social media as soon as they're in stock. And obviously, once they're gone, they're gone. I don't expect it'll be many, unless we can get Greg really drunk tonight and agree to.
We've got like half an hour, right? Yeah, I'll shoot off after that. Now, do you know, in all seriousness, but like it's an absolute privilege coming and talking about these things, because to whiskey drinkers out there, they just love discovering new things, and it makes our job as the sort of sales and commercial team just like it's an absolute privilege to come and talk about the whiskey. But we're also kind of on this journey where we're trying to grow as a brand, but we've got limited stocks of everything we release, and we clearly want to look after our followers who have got us to this point already. But at the same time, we need to come and reach a new audience as well. So it's a real fine balance in that.
Well, hopefully, we'll generate some new followers for you. I mean, I really like this idea of this sort of twofold approach. One is to create a range where you're taking people on a journey of the development of that house style, and you get to see each iteration as it comes out, as it develops, and until presumably at some point you reach sort of maturity, where you want to be, whether it's 10 years old or 12 years old or whatever it is. Maybe it won't have an age statement, but it might be around about that time. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, here's the possibility with this new make spirit. Here's what we could do with it. We could put it in these casks or that, and that's fascinating to sort of to be able to have the freedom to do both, and to then obviously release that and get the feedback from it.
Yeah, I mean, it is that balance. It's like you've got your core house style that's like 80% of what we do. Blending is a big part of the story for both the Whiskey Maker Reserve house style as well as these editions. So it is the cask, but it's about just creating as much flavor with those casks. But how you blend plays when I say you, I mean our Davil and the team, whiskey making team, creating that flavor. But yeah, it gives us a really nice balance, because we do, ultimately we want to be known for our house style, that sherry-led style. But this is almost like the more fun stuff, the creative stuff, the something new and interesting that will hopefully keep our followers engaged and actually, keep our own team enjoying and wanting to taste more as well. So yeah, it's a nice balance. It's a nice balance.
Yeah. What's the why is it called Bal Masque?
So the idea is that so the Bal Masque is French for masquerade ball. So French because of this French oak influence that we'll probably talk a bit more when we get stuck into the whiskey. And the idea being it's quite a mysterious, layered, complex whiskey, and hence masquerade ball being by its very nature quite a mysterious event. And for context, the previous one was Lagoutte, which is French for it's like an occasion, like an afternoon tea in France. And the idea of that occasion where you go to a French patisserie and pick up some cakes, and it's almost in parts of France that's quite the French equivalent to like afternoon tea, which for us would maybe be cucumber sandwiches, if that floats your boat.
So Cornish cream tea, where I'm from. But,
yeah, exactly that. So it's kind of like that. So that whiskey was very much, lots of vanilla and sweet, subtle, fragrant, and it kind of was reminiscent of that trip to the cake shop in Paris. So there is some method behind the names, and we've got a few more in the pipeline for later this year and next year as well.
Cool. Well, let's. I mean, I've started tasting it already, so let's get involved in this. And there's already a few questions coming in around some of the production and tasting notes as well. So we'll get to those too. So French oak. So let's get this one up. What wine was in the barrel? What has there been anything? Is this virgin oak, or has it had anything in it before, or is there mixture?
It wouldn't have been virgin oak. Don't think the team really used virgin oak too much. So it will have had. I know that there's some Bordeaux that's been used in the past. And I just know that because that was one of the, using sort of ex-Bordeaux wine casks allows that kind of restraint to hold back some of that French oak property. So I can definitely confirm Bordeaux as one, but I'd have to double check on some of the others, I'm afraid.
Yeah, sure. Which is why when you smell it, I think you do get a little bit of that kind of blackberry plum, sort of a little bit of red fruit note on it. For me,
I mean, it's for me. I mean, the first thing for me is it's just fragrant. Like it's sort of delicate. There's lots going on.
Well, we gave it because these pouches we did two. There's always color coded. I don't know if you know this, but they're color coded. In fact, if I get the don't worry, guys, we're not leaving you. Let me just show you this. So there's the colors there. And each color represents a sort of flavor group, and purple is fragrance, and orange is spice. So basically, what we're saying is it's fragrant and spicy, which do you think is a pretty good summary of this whiskey? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there's two kind of French oaks that are kind of dominant. One that kind of brings some of that spiciness, and then a different one that brings that kind of fragrance, incense, and a bit of sweetness almost. So again, it's that blending of those two styles of oak. That actually, I think you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of it's almost like you've read the tasting notes.
It's almost like that, isn't it? But yeah, it's also it's a characteristic of European and French oak, right? Is you get that tannic spice to it that you just don't really find in American oak. If you think about American oak in its sort of purest form being like bourbon whiskey, right? You're just sort of imparting this barrel onto, a relatively not neutral, but mild tasting spirit. All that flavor you're getting there is from the American oak, and of course it's vanilla and white chocolate and coconut and all that kind of stuff, but not a lot of spice. Whereas if you think about the kind of characteristics that you're getting in certain cognacs and in this whiskey, we're coming from that French oak, is that peppery spice. It's got that grip, that tannic, that dryness, and it's such a good thing to have in a whiskey because, of course, it lends structure to the dram. So when you're tasting, it clings to the palate, it holds on, it gives some grip. And then, of course, that's balanced by that little bit of sweetness. And then you've got all those aromatic qualities coming through as well. And you end up with an all-encompassing dram, something that really kind of checks all the boxes.
Yeah, and actually some of the things that you've referenced actually applies to our Whiskey Maker Reserve as well. So Whiskey Maker Reserve 3 in particular, there was a bit of French oak. I mean, not to steal away from the sherry, but there was a bit of French oak that came through there. And it was for that to bring a bit of fragrance and to, the fragrance. And there was just a little bit of wood spice going on in Whiskey Maker Reserve 3 that was just, again, part of that kind of journey that we're wrong with our house style. And I think just the danger with French oak is it can be overpowering. If you don't get it right, it can become woody, astringent, those kind of features, which no one really wants too much of that going on in their glass. But that's just, again, where the kind of blending comes in and using some other casks as well, but ultimately just kind of restraining it and make sure you get that spiciness and that bite of mouthfeel without it being too overpowering.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting one.
I think it's an absolutely fantastic whiskey, and it's strong, right? Isn't it 54%, 54.5%?
54%.
You would
54%.
not know it, would you? Absolutely incredible. Like it's, I mean, I don't know if it's just me. I drink a lot of whiskey. Perhaps I'm just numb to the taste of ethanol now, but that really does go down quite nicely. I mean, I'm sure it's great with a drop of water, but it's perfectly palatable on its own as it is. Nice and concentrated and, juicy, gooey.
I think I've become almost numb to it as well, because our first two releases of the Whiskey Maker Reserve were cask strength over 60% ABV, and I personally needed a drop of water just to release it and calm it down somewhat. But yeah, this at 54%, it's, I mean, the lowest ABV whiskey we've released so far in terms of our single malt is 49.5%, which was Lagute, the one I described before. So, I mean, never say never, but right now I don't think there's much in the pipeline really dropping below kind of 49-50% ABV.
Yeah.
I think it's just so we carry that flavour. I think that's the idea.
Carries the flavour. And you know what? If you want to add a bit of water to it, fine. At least you've got the option then to drink it two different ways. I just think, releasing at higher strength like that, it just gives you more ways to appreciate it. That's basically it from my point of view. You get to see it in its sort of pure, naked form, not dressed up with water, not diluted down, the hardcore version. And then you can try it with water as well if you want to. And, at that point, you're getting, sort of 40% extra free if you dilute down to 40%, so.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, our approach or our suggestion, we don't go big on food pairings or like, certainly with a single malt, it's kind of like the message is enjoy it how you like.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, like, personally, I wouldn't serve this, in a highball with soda, because I think you'd lose so much. But it's not to say we wouldn't suggest that with other single malts that we release in the future. Yeah, like, enjoy it how you like. I mean, I'd probably stop at pouring sort of fizzy, sugar laden soft drinks in there, but yeah, within reason, enjoy how you like.
Yeah, well, we're all for that as well. But there are certain times where you're like, enjoy it how you like, but please try it on its own as well.
Yeah.
To sort of get some insight into what this whiskey is all about. And this is one of those ones where you don't want to miss the opportunity to try it on its own. I think most of the people watching this and our members are they're going to be drinking on its own or with a bit of water or maybe some ice. We do. I mean, we've sent out whiskies before that we've advised try mixing it, put it in a cocktail, soda water, ginger ale, whatever it might be, and they perform really well like that. But ones like this, I think it deserves to be enjoyed on its own. It's what I would say is that you only need to do the maths. Started distilling end of 2014. We're now in 2021, so the oldest possible whiskey in this bottle would be not even 7 years, and that's incredible to me that you can produce a whiskey of this sort of quality. Low-ish single-digit numbers, between 3 and 6 years old, or probably something like that. It is amazing that this sort of quality can be produced like that, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks for the feedback. Certainly the guys up at the distillery would love to hear that. And yeah, I think it comes down to, the cask selection and having access to some amazing casks. Then it's actually making sure you've got the right neutral grain spirit going in to those casks as well, because those two need to obviously meet. And ultimately, yeah, it's around the team and knowing how to look after those casks and when to, something we do is the process called élevage, where we'll take that spirit out if it's, if we think it needs moving to a different cask, if maybe the cask is a bit too active, or maybe it's not enough, or we can move it within the warehouse. There's all manner of things in terms of how the team look after the cask to add more flavour. And
that's another French practice, isn't it? Used in cognac production. Yeah.
Which we've totally borrowed from them, because it was, to your point, it was just another way to pack more flavour into every bottle that we produce. And we're not afraid to look outside for other influences. And yeah, that's the idea. So you're right, it can't possibly be older than 7 years, any drop of that whiskey, which does make me even more excited for the future in terms of when, looking 15, 20 years ahead in terms of what the team are capable of producing.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Maybe that's why it's called Masked Ball. Maybe it's masking a 20-year-old whiskey that someone made.
If you've seen the photos of the distillery before, you'll probably realise there was no way that there was much distilling going on.
Yeah. So I've got some questions coming through. I'm going to put up some tasting notes though. Damsons, plums, sticky dates. I'm definitely in agreement with that. All those sort of dark. And those are the kind of fruits where, in the right sort of context, they do take on that almost sort of incensey, spicy, mysterious kind of, weird fruitiness, which I guess is sort of, the whole Masked Ball thing and this sort of sultry kind of spiced, fruity characteristic, plays in nicely with those fruit.
Almost like overripe, almost.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. When it becomes overripe and a bit funky. Yeah.
Yeah, because I get almost like a bit of dust, like a bit of muskiness on it as well, which I think is just maybe the spice or that French oak. And
yeah,
actually for me personally, I like almost like apple pie or stewed apples, cooked apples.
Yeah,
coming through, so not dissimilar.
All right, well, let's just put up all of Simon's tasting notes tonight, shall we? Here we go. What's he saying next? Let's finish strong and the spice comes through. And he agrees that it's great whiskey, older than its years. And this is something that's coming through from a few people. Right. Here's a question for you. Recently visit the Lakes and purchased the Quatrefoil collection. Great to see the collab Whiskey Me. Great team had that. And then Hinesh goes on to ask, would love to see part of the Quatrefoil collection as a Whiskey Me tasting. See if we can arrange that.
Might be a challenge. I'll make a commitment that we can get you some stock, a bit more Bal Masque.
Maybe we should do a one-off, like super exclusive, ticketed tasting. One bottle.
What? Wow, one bottle. Do you know what? We've never say never.
No.
but I'm not going to commit on air to that we can quite manage that.
I love this. This is stopped being a tasting. It started just being a public kind of business negotiation where I'm trying to pin you down to.
It feels like an ambush, to be honest. But
yeah. Is the distillery open for tours at the moment?
It absolutely is. Open for business. The team there, we have had to kind of restructure things and just limit the number of people on each tour. So, I mean, to be honest, September is normally as busy as August for the team up there. So I would just suggest dropping them an email ahead of time to make sure you can get at the right time booked in. But yeah, open for business.
You got a pretty fancy restaurant there as well, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
there's a lovely restaurant on site. We've got, I mean, it's a beautiful setting. I mean, weather permitting, it's a lovely place to sit outside and have some lunch or afternoon tea. But yeah, lovely restaurant, nice gift shop. I mean, it's just a nice place to go and actually stretch your legs. And we actually get an awful lot of people like stopping off on long cycles and stopping for a bit of lunch and then jumping back on the bike, hopefully not having enjoyed too many drams before they do so.
Yeah. Well, I was saying to you offline, I am long overdue a revisit, A, to come visit the distillery, and B, because I'm big into ultra running, and obviously the Lake District is a fantastic spot to go and run some fells and all that sort of stuff. So I need to somehow come up with a weekend that involves lots and lots of running and drinking whiskey at the Lakes Distillery, and I'm trying to work out how the two are compatible with one another.
We can make that. Well, if you need, I mean, we actually do a single malt and chocolate tasting tour, which is fantastic in terms of then pairing those things together and the role that whiskey can have on chocolate and how it affects your palate and stuff. So just if you're after a bit of post-run nutrition as well.
In my experience, drinking lots of whiskey after a run, it doubles the effect of the alcohol. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, please don't take that as health advice from me. No. That's definitely not the case. But yeah, absolutely open for tours, and we've got a kind of basic tour that covers all things spirits. But yeah, there's a couple of nice sort of single malt experiences on offer as well. Yeah,
cool, good stuff. All right, Greg. Look, thanks so much for coming on, and we are. If not the Quatrefoil, then definitely we're going to hold you to getting a few more bottles of Bal Masque on the website. We will put this out on social media on Instagram and Facebook once we've managed to pin Greg down, forcefully acquire some more Bal Masque off him.
we'll pick that conversation up tomorrow morning. We'll get something sorted, and genuinely, like, it's been an absolute privilege, and we're just in the process of sorting out our plans for next year's releases, and would love to come and have a conversation around what we could do next year as well.
Well, I think based on Bal Masque, everyone will be excited about that. I certainly am, because I think you're not supposed to pick favorites, but I don't know. I think Lakes is probably my favorite up and coming English whiskey distillery. I think you're doing some really cool stuff, and I look forward to seeing how it progresses in the future for sure.
Well, we've got lots in the pipeline, yeah, and thanks for the feedback and thanks for having us. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure.
All right, cool. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.